usually three ways, right? It's either you're born into the business, you stumble into the business in some very interesting way, right? Or like me, you get conned into the business. But it's usually one of those three. But look, you're third generation, and I think that's absolutely awesome.
Welcome to the Strategy with Jason podcast. Tune in for everything you need to know to stay in the know regarding the automotive industry. Here's your host, Jason Harris.
Hey, what's going on, Podcast Nation? It is Jason Harris here, and thank you for joining me on another episode of Strategy with Jason. Today I have a very famous guest, or maybe infamous guest. We will find out here through our conversation. I have the one, the only, Sandy Cerami. Sandy, what's up? How you doing, man?
What's up, Jay? Infamous is definitely more on the mark, I think, to be honest with you.
This is more on the mark. Hey, man, thanks so much for taking the time to jam with me today. We got some cool topics that we're going to discuss today. But before we get into those topics, though, I love kicking off these podcasts with a little origin story. Because I'm always fascinated to find out how people get into the island of misfit toys that I call the automotive industry. So, Sandy, how did you get started in the automotive industry?
Well, it's funny, Jay, because when we were talking offline, I said, I do have a story that starts at a really young age, and I'm a third generation car brat. So I'm a third generation misfit, if you will. And my dad and my grandfather, God rest them, would be laughing right now at that statement. But as I said, I was a third generation car brat. My grandfather started out with a service station. He borrowed about $500 from Standard Oil Company back in the 30s. And started a service station and then parlayed that into 3 service stations. And he had a gentleman that had a commercial account with him that owed him money, could not pay him. And so he gave him his car. My grandfather reconditioned it and sold the car on his service station lot. They split the profits 50-50. And my grandfather got what he had owed to him back. And then he turned around and said, that's a pretty good way to make a living. Went out, bought another car and did it again and again and again until he became a prominent used car operator in the Northeast corridor. And he ended up with a Pontiac franchise back in 1956, December of 1956. A franchise, quite honestly, nobody wanted at that point in time. But, as a used car operator, he was excited to get his start. And, I grew up literally in and around a car dealership and really wanted to go to work with my dad because I love spending time with him. And so I would go literally as a 6-7-year-old kid into the dealership on Saturdays and work around the lot. I was driving cars at like the age of 10 or 11, which my kids tend to get a real kick out of. And I fell in love with the business. I'm not, as I think I said to you offline, I'm not a real car guy, if you will. If you said to me, what year, what engine, those things escape me, to be honest with you, with a couple of rare exceptions. But I love the people aspect of the business. I love the business piece of it. I love the relationships. That is what has always drawn me to the business. So I had a really early attraction to the business, and I've been fortunate enough to spend my entire life in it.
Well, I love the fact that you were born into it, right? I usually find that happens. It's usually three ways, right? It's either you're born into the business, you stumble into the business in some very interesting way, right? Or like me, you get conned into the business. But it's usually one of those three. But, look, you're third generation, and I think that's absolutely awesome. And I love the fact that you brought up people, right? Because how often do we call this industry a people business? But how much emphasis do we really put on people? Just not just the people that we have, but the people we want to attract and recruit, but just also retaining the people that we have. It's like, look, we're first to jump on that new marketing strategy and invest heavily into something that's going to convert us considerably more leads or more opportunities. But when I look at the budgets and then I look at what we allocate to the people, it's funny that sometimes we call it a people business. And I know you got some cool thoughts on this. So this is where I wanted to go. So how to attract, recruit, hire, and retain just top talent. Boy, so much has changed in the last 24 months, man. I'd love to kind of get your thoughts on how it's changed and just how do we continue to retain that top talent?
Well, it's funny. I'm going to go back to a episode of a podcast I saw with Scott Joseph and Grant Cardone. And Grant said to Scott Joseph, who owns and is the CEO at J&L Digital Marketing, he said, when I was out there doing training, he says, I realized that people didn't want what I had. They wanted what you had, which was marketing. And to your point, a lot of times dealerships and businesses in general will search for solutions in the next great marketing campaign or the next great piece of technology or equipment. And it's people that power the profitability and performance of any business
100%.
for the most part. And I think that is missed very often because we just have this convenient respect and appreciation for people when we need them. And when we don't feel as though we need them as much, a lot of times we forget how important they really are. And so when we talk about finding, attracting, hiring, retaining top talent and great people, if we don't identify as a business that really respects and appreciates people and wants to invest and develop them, top talent is not looking for an opportunity to join our organization. They're looking for that path to success and achievement along the way.
And I love the fact that you brought up development, right? Because that's just something that, when I'm thinking, when I got attracted to the car business, right? Well, it was actually a bet. I got conned into it. So someone bet me, all right, that I couldn't sell cars. And I was like, well, let me show you. And they're like, well, training starts on Saturday. Show up, right?
Yep.
Little did I know that if I showed up to this training and I stayed on for 3 months, the guy that made that bet to me got paid $500 for recruiting me. So,
Right.
so he recruited me on a bet, but yeah. So, but I the way I was attracted was it was 6-figure income. That's what it was. That was the core of everything they said to me. You're going to make 6 figures in the first 3 months, that you're in the car business. And now, ironically, I did, but that's not necessarily what people are attracted by these days now. I mean, I didn't go in and they didn't tell me like there was like a path of development. Like if I started here and I wanted to go there, all right, there was none of that talk. It was like, no, you're just going to make money. But I don't think that necessarily speaks to everybody these days.
I would agree with you 100%. As a matter of fact, we recently partnered with Scott Trainer and the crew over at usamotorjobs.com. And he and I have had this conversation a lot over the course of the last 6-7 weeks. And how we speak to top talent with respect to recruiting campaigns that we conduct is all the difference in the world. If you sound like everybody else that talks about the 6-figure income and, incredible earning potential, and you don't speak to the things that become more important in today's day and age, like flexible scheduling, 4-day work weeks, childcare, things that are going to get the attention of top talent in the marketplace that sets you apart from everybody else, then I think you miss great opportunity.
But you know what? It's funny. Are we always looking for top talent? I can't tell you. No, and don't get me wrong. There's some amazing dealerships out there that have figured out how to crack the code of hiring, developing, recruiting, and attracting top talent. But I've consulted with hundreds, almost thousands of dealerships across the country, right? And how often have you ever heard that statement of, I just need warm bodies. Just give me a warm body and I'll turn him into a salesperson. I think we like to use the word top talent, but we don't necessarily define what does it mean to be top talent.
I'm glad you asked me that question because I'm going to tell you something else that I hear very often. That is, I just can't seem to find good people.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. That's another one. Yes.
Said that, or you've ever heard that, then I've got a point to make with you, and that is this: we have to redefine in our minds what top talent means. So a lot of times when I say top talent, immediately, and we're talking specifically about dealerships, they're thinking about, the top producing technician who's doing 80 to 100 hours a week. You're talking about the top selling professional who's delivering anywhere between 30 and 50 cars a month. And while that certainly does represent top talent, we were, starting down the vein of people development. Top talent means starting with a high quality person, somebody that's got the personality traits, characteristics, and attributes that represent opportunity, meaning hunger. They've got discipline, they've got focus, they've got a strong desire to succeed. Those are what I'm talking about in terms of the attributes of top talent in the marketplace. And very often what I see is, that dealerships are only recruiting when they've got this desperate, urgent need to fill an open position, and that quote unquote warm body will do. I'm looking for somebody, anybody, a warm body to fill the position so we can get back to business. But the truth of the matter is that whether you're hiring or not, if you're not looking for and interviewing top talent every single day, every single week, every single month of the year, you're missing an opportunity.
I agree. And I'm also trying to think top talent. I was thinking, was one of the best sales managers I've ever had work for me. Right? She was a kindergarten teacher. She was top talent. And I'll tell you, look, at a manager, was she going to sell me 50 cars a month? Absolutely not. No, it was not her thing. All right. She knew how to herd cats in a way that no one else knew how to. The fact that if she could manage a room of 20 kindergartners, it was pretty much the same thing as managing a showroom with 20 full-grown adult salespeople arguing over who gets what split. You know,
listen, you're not wrong.
But I was hiring for the talent, for the job, and I find sometimes that, you know, I think what we end up doing is we end up hiring what we need, not necessarily what our customers need. You know, and what my customers needed was a manager that they could connect with. All right, and a manager that could juggle 20 different things simultaneously. Right. And so let's talk a little bit about that, because I find too often we're hiring for someone who's going to be a 50 car person.
Yep.
Right. But is that the type of person that's right for my customers? You know, should we be hiring for ourselves, or should we be hiring for what our customers' needs are? And how do we balance that?
I think the short answer is that I want to hire good people that want to achieve at a high level. Because good people will tend to do the right thing, right? And so that'll always benefit our clients in the dealership world, and will certainly benefit as a direct byproduct of the behavior and the level of performance, that they deliver. I like hungry people. I like people that have a thirst for, or an appetite for, personal and professional development, because they tend to be the ones that will really be disciplined enough to do the work, the little things that need to be repeated day in and day out to deliver the kind of experience to our clients that our clients are desperately looking for, and the results that we need to run a profitable business. And so I think you start with good people, you give them the resources, the training, the development that they need. And I think ultimately the byproduct is the success mutually of the individual and also the dealership, and the client has a great experience in the process.
Well, and this is kind of a perfect segue kind of into our next topic, because we're going to talk about culture, right? Like I'll tell you, the first dealership I worked at had an amazing culture, but not a good culture. So let me I'll explain a little bit, right? The culture was about making money. It was 100% all about making money. Everybody was on board with this, right? There was definitely a culture around that. I mean, look, my GM, the only time you ever saw him, by the way, was on Saturdays. But when he came in on a Saturday, he came in with a roll of $100 bills in his pocket, and it was my job to do is whatever I needed to do, get as many of those out of his pocket and into my pocket, right? We did stupid shit, right? Like the first person that could hold some customer's hand and jump up and down in the bed of a pickup got $200. Yep. You know, the first person that got someone on all fours underneath the sedan to show him the new welds on the frame, all right, got another $100. All right. It was a bad culture to the customer, but it was a good culture in the sense that it was really well defined. It was incredibly well defined. And see, this is the thing. So when we're talking about, you know, attracting, recruiting, and hiring and retaining people, it's like they have to fit within our culture, or that's there. It doesn't matter if they're top talent or not, if they don't fit within the mold of the culture. So let's talk a little bit like, how do we define, all right, what the culture is, and what do you think the impact, you know, of great culture versus poor culture is?
Well, listen, I'll go right to Drucker. Drucker said it best, that, you know, culture eats strategy for breakfast.
There you go. I like that.
To your point, when you talk about the fact that they were using the fistful of dollars to incentivize the behavior of the salespeople in your dealership, there's nothing wrong with that, right? Now, whether it's got a negative impact on the client or the prospect is a different conversation, but ultimately they were getting the kind of behavior that they sought, and they were driving the kind of cultural vibe that they were looking for, which is fine. And I tend to not judge, if you will, the culture unless it's a culture that is, you know, the den of thieves, and the client is really being taken advantage of, and the people in the organization are not, you know, well treated. Like that, to me, is bad culture. Killer culture, which is something that we talk about all the time, has three very essential elements, and that's leadership, accountability, and recognition, both of a good or a bad job, so that people understand exactly what's expected of them. And all too often I say, in my trainings, that if you don't know what a good job is, it's going to be awful tough for you to succeed in the position that you're in. So it becomes very, very important to make sure that we tell people when they're doing a good job and what it looks like in advance. To your point about how do we set up for great culture in our business? We have a platform called SCA 365 Recruiting, and we take our clients through the management of a recruiting campaign. We start at the very beginning with a little bit of a self-awareness exercise in terms of what's important to them. What are the values of their organization? Because that helps us define what their culture is all about. And then we ask for them to develop a candidate profile, or an avatar, if you will, of what the ideal candidate is going to look like in terms of three things. We're talking about, their qualities, their personality traits, if you will, their values, the things that they think are important in terms of their behavior, and then also their qualifications, whether it's experience or a skill set. It really makes no difference. I think very often it's both. But when we have an opportunity to develop a level of self-awareness from the organization, as well as an awareness, a hyper awareness of who it is that you want to hire for that position and why it would make sense, then I think a lot of good things happen as a result, and your culture is now lifted or improved as opposed to disrupted.
I like that. And we do have to spend more time defining our culture, right? I go into a lot of dealerships and we'll talk to dealerships. Oh, we have a culture. We have a great culture. And I said, okay, so where's that document at? What do you mean?
Well, I'm sorry. It's a great point. Jay, you're on the mark, buddy. You're on the mark.
It can't just exist in my head, right?
Yep. We actually developed a process. Got my right-hand guy, my right-hand side, Mr. Ron Marvo. We've developed a process that walks our clients through exactly what you're talking about and gives them a document. And we ask them to identify 7 to 12 words or phrases that describe their culture. And we give them about 100 different ones that they can look at to help them get some clarity there, because they're really not ever asked that question. I like to get it to like 2 to 3 words. What are the 2 to 3 words that you would use to describe the culture in your dealership? And if you can't give me a clear answer, then I ask you to go to all of your people and do a very simple, survey monkey survey. Ask your people to give you, 3 to 5 words that would describe the culture of your dealership. And you're going to get a very interesting perspective back as a result of that exercise. And
I think that for a lot of people out there, what they don't realize is that culture exists regardless if you give it direction or not.
Sure.
Like, it will exist in the dealership, and a lot of times you can read through a dealership's Google reviews, and you can actually get kind of an idea of what that culture is going to be like when you go into it based on the words or the experiences that customers, have gone through. Look, it's not a matter of what we do. We all know what we do. We sell and service metal. Like, it's pretty easy, right? And, we all know how we do it for the most part. We all do it the exact same damn way. It's why we do it the way we do it, I think, really starts to open up some of those culture conversations. And you're 100% right. I think you have to spend the time to identify the key words. When I had my Mitsubishi dealership, all right, it was hassle-free and innovative. All right, I wanted, and so having those two pillars, all right, hassle-free and innovative, all right, I was able to reverse engineer backwards towards who I hired. All right. Exactly. How I develop them. All right. What processes, we just looked at every single process and just like, how can I make us answering the phone hassle-free and innovative? Well, if they call into the dealership and they have to press 3 for this and 2 for that and 4 for this and then get put on hold, that's really not probably hassle-free or innovative. So let's just remove all of it. All right. And we worked out a process that no matter what, the phone got rang in less than 3 rings every single time, no matter what. So everybody in the dealership had to participate in that. But when you define those cultures, those pillar words, right, you can go backwards towards your people and your process, and shit gets real. Like, it's really cool looking when you get to that place. I'm sure you've seen some great examples yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go right back to the book by the great Dr. Stephen Covey, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And one of those habits,
what a classic,
beginning with the end in mind, right? What are we talking about? We spend more time preparing for a weekend marketing event or sales event than we do preparing the next year in terms of our operations. Like, exactly. So we don't even look at, something that's going to be perpetual. Forget about the planning for the next year. Perpetually, what is our culture look, feel, and sound like? And I'll tell you that Maya Angelou is probably the guiding force for me in terms of how do we define culture and why is it so critically important. She said, people will very often forget what you've said, right? So the transactional piece and the sales process, they'll forget what you said, but they'll always remember how you make them feel. That's Maya Angelou at her finest. Yes. And there's so many lessons for us in there in terms of dealing with people. You know, like you said, we're all transacting, right? At the end of the day, we're transacting. It's how we wrap the client experience around the transaction that is all the difference in the world.
Well, and I love the fact that you brought up the client experience, right? Because I've always, people go, well, I got to focus on my customer experience, my customer experience. Well, that's great. You never define your culture. I don't even understand how people can actually define an experience if they haven't defined their culture, because everything has got to go back to what that ultimate goal is from a culture perspective of, you know, what I want to be described as or how I want to be viewed as a culture. And, and a lot of that has to do with the salespeople. And, you know, so I think this is a good segue kind of into our next topic because, you know, we were talking a little bit about this before we got recording, right? I mean, salespeople, and look at salespeople today. Look at the industries changing. Look at some of the new news that's coming out. It might even change it even more so, right? You know, but I don't know about you, but I'd love to get your thoughts on this. I just feel like the art of business development has almost disappeared. And now it's just, and now it's just like there are just salespeople, which are really just facilitating a transaction, kind of like what you're saying. So what do you think the difference between salespeople today and business development experts are? I find it's rare to find one over the other, but I'd love to get your thoughts.
Well, I can say this to you. There is a fundamental difference between sales and business development from this perspective. I think that business development is a far more lofty and a higher altitude of selling, if you will. I think it's a much more sophisticated approach to selling. If we were to break selling down into its basics, you know, the most successful selling professionals that I've come across in the past have either been great hunters or great farmers. Very rarely do I find a combination of the two where they're able to go out and find client opportunities and convert everyday conversations into those client opportunities, as opposed to somebody that farms the opportunities that are brought to them by consistent and effective marketing by their dealership. When we talk about true business development, you know, I call them business development experts. Those are folks that understand that opening up a relationship is far more important and far more powerful than closing a deal. Okay. And there's a fundamental difference. I hear all the time about how great the closer is at a store. And I think that's fantastic. If you're able to feed them enough and they don't have the skill set to deliver themselves a number of opportunities on a regular basis, then, you know, great, you can keep at it. But the folks that know how to do it organically, that know how to literally convert everyday conversations into client opportunities are the ones that I really keenly focus on. The ones that have been able to use social media effectively to organically drive lead generation for themselves and for their dealership become incredibly valuable because you can lower the cost of client acquisition as a result of that. You can more efficiently and more powerfully deploy your marketing and advertising dollars. There's so many different benefits to employing business development experts over just pure salespeople. I could go on all day, believe me.
Well, you know what? I was thinking about it, and I can actually see a reason why just have salespeople and not business development experts, right? Like, I mean, you think about this, right? Like, I can see, you know, like, but it goes down into what we're talking about before. Like, what is your culture about? You know, it's like if you don't want to have, you know, business development experts and the intent is just nothing but a volume play, and it's just like a transactional thing of getting them in and getting them out as quick as possible. There are customers out there that just want that. You know, there's one of the reasons why I do like going into the Apple store is that I don't have to stand in line at a checkout, or there is no checkout. There's no checkout, right? Like, I go up to the wall, I grab the new screen protector from my phone, I find one of the geniuses, and I'm like, okay, I need this. They're like, okay, no problem. Ding, sign here. I'm on and I'm out.
Yep.
Right. You know, because that's what I was looking for. So I do think, like, but I just feel like, you know, we're just kind of flooding our industry with salespeople, and I think we just kind of forget, that there's still a lot of opportunity around developing people, because you know what? It's a path of least resistance. That's what I think it is. It is easier to hire a salesperson than to develop a salesperson into a business development expert. So therefore, I think we're almost accepting the fact that it's not all transactional. But when I sold cars, when you sold cars, it had nothing to do with the transaction. It had everything to do with the relationship. And I'm fighting with you probably hear it. I'm fighting back and forth with myself right now. Which one's
Listen,
better?
You're not alone, Jay. I think
Right?
you're identifying the great conflict that we're experiencing right now. You know, you can take a look at Jim Farley's recent announcement from Ford, you don't have to look far beyond that to see,
Right.
where the OEMs want to take this business. The truth of the matter is I just had a really recent experience where, ironically enough, with a Ford dealership, I had referred a colleague of mine to Rob Ruth Ford, and I got to give them a shout out and a nod. Rob Ruth and his crew at Bob Ruth Ford in Dillsburg, PA. They made the best out of a really terrible OEM disaster on an ordered unit over the course of like 9 months. And the ball was continually dropped by the manufacturer, and they provided zero solution or resolution to the issue. It took the dealer to ultimately get it done. So, when we talk about, hiring top talent and talking about the importance of relationships and problem solving, that can't be done, quite honestly, by a computer, and certainly can't be done at the OEM level where there's no meaningful connection on a personal level to the end client. I think that when I reference a business development expert, they are just as adept at handling that purely transactional experience as anybody else out there. And that's why I always err on the side of, let me bring in the top talent, because they're going to be able to handle those little everyday transactional pieces just as easily.
I think that's a good point. I think you're right. It's a good point, right? That someone who's strong in business development can easily just handle the transactional side of it. But I think this also kind of comes down to our brand, which is a perfect segue, kind of what we're talking about. Now, we're going to talk about personal brands, but it's not only just the personal brands. Like the brand of the dealership equates to the individual brands that exist within the dealership, and
Yes.
if in those individual brands are in line with your culture, so you hired them right, all right, so everything's going to gel really well together. But I don't think we spend necessarily enough time as a brand to identify, like, the why do business with me. There are people that do legitimately still want to deal with business development people.
Mm-hmm.
They want to sit down, they want to generate a relationship. Like, I'm going to go spend $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, all right, I want to have some type of connection with this person. And then there are other people out there like, I want no connection, just check me out and I'll get the hell out of here. Right?
Yeah.
But I won't go too much farther down that rabbit hole. Let's go down the other rabbit hole of branding. I would love to kind of get your thoughts on, salespeople and business development experts creating their own personal branding, pros, cons, do's, don'ts. Where do you want to go with it?
I think pros. I don't even know any cons off the top of my head, to be honest with you. I think the only con is not taking your personal brand seriously. With the advent and the impact and influence of social media at this point in the world, to not look at yourself and place a high value on establishing what your personal brand is in the marketplace. If you're selling anything, whether it's automobiles or widgets, it really doesn't make a difference to me. Taking the time to get real clear in terms of who you are and what you provide in terms of a benefit and level of service for your clients. So I get very granular. When I start to have conversations with our clients, our coaching clients, about establishing personal brand, I want to know, what are the 2 or 3 words that you want people to say about you after having had an experience with you professionally, to people at a cocktail party, to the people at the Little League baseball field, at the dance studio. What do you want them to say about the experience that they've had with you? And then map everything that you do to that type of a description of the experience. And I think that makes it much easier for folks to gain clarity and then ultimately map the path to building out that personal brand.
And I know we're using the word personal brand, and I want to throw another word in there just, so we can have some fun back and forth with this, right?
Sure.
But I actually find it to be more of a professional brand. Because, I'll give you, for example, for myself, right? I don't believe I have a personal brand. I have a professional brand, and everything I've talked about, is about operations. It's about marketing. It's about process. It's about technology, right? And professionally, that is what I do day in and day out. Now, just recently at my team just yelling at me for years to start putting out more of a personal brand, is I'm just going to start launching a new podcast series called BOP, and that's the business of parenting. Now, so that's me personally, and I think that's where people kind of get sometimes mixed up when they're building out their brands, is that you can maintain both a personal brand and a professional brand. I have this sales manager that I know really well. The guy's a total sneakerhead. Like, I'm talking like I don't
Yeah.
get this thing, by the way. Like, I don't, but he's like hardcore sneakerhead, right? Really specializes in Air Jordans. Like, that's his jam, right? He's got, some very expensive ones, right? And
Big business, Jay. It's big
100%.
business.
But that's his personal brand. Like, when he's not at work, the guy's a total sneakerhead. He does not look like a guy that's going to wear a suit. All right. He's got his streetwear on. All right. He's got whatever kicks that he's showing that day. And he's proud of those kicks. And he's part of a community around those kicks. That becomes his personal brand. Now, sometimes that bleeds over. And those people that he's connected with are like, well, hey, I know you do sell cars. I know what you do for a living. Can you help me with something like that? So I love to kind of get your thoughts on, because I see people try to attempt to blend the two. Sometimes it works, and sometimes I find it's unsuccessful. And what ultimately ends up happening is kind of like a fake it till you make it kind of a thing, where it's like,
buddy, you
know what I'm going with this.
I do. You just hit the bullseye, baby. I mean, I have this conversation with my guy Ron all the time, and I talk about how critically important it is to become the very best and most honest and trustworthy version of ourselves. And so you spoke about the blending of the personal and the professional side, and I think that that's okay in today's world, because there is such voyeuristic access to our lives as a result of social media. But, there are no shortage, and we'll talk specifically about sales and business development, right? Because that's really the vein that we were in as we led to this point in the conversation. There is no shortage of some of the industry, quote unquote, experts out there in sales and selling that are screaming into your mobile phone screen, your tablet, or your PC and laptop, telling you you've got to be more like them and you've got to be this. If you want to be successful, you've got to change and you've got to do it differently. And I call bullshit on that, to be completely honest with you. Do we have to evolve a bit? Do we have to transform ourselves a bit? Yes. But in this regard, we've got to become the very best version of ourselves. And people respond to genuine and authentic, not hyped over the top. Now, if you're hyped and over the top and that's your genuine, authentic personality, then that will play.
Sure.
It will play really well. What you said before about the fake it till you make it, there's too many folks out there that are trying to force the brand that they quote unquote want to be versus who they really truly are. And I think that's when you start to see people fall flat on their face and struggle and have a real difficult time and ultimately cry uncle and give out. The one that you can ride long term and that is sustainable is being the very best version of you and staying true to that.
You know what? And I find it's kind of a generational thing. I think that's kind of funny, because I think if you were a kid in the 80s, all right, and you grew up with wrestling, right, you think that's what you need to be as far as a brand. Like, you need to like summon your inner McMahon. You're like, now coming to the stage, the brand new 2022 Camry XLE, like...
Yeah. Listen, Vince, very successful, right? Yeah. Like wildly successful. That is his personality. That, Vince McMahon is a hard charger. And he stayed true and I think authentic to his personality, because that's what he is ultimately. And I think that's the point. The point is find out what are the very best aspects and character traits of your personality and work towards cultivating a personal or / professional brand that speaks to that, because there's going to be a significant enough segment of the population that's going to positively respond to that.
Well, I love this. I love the word that you use, the word positive, right? Because if you could authentically blend those two together is when amazing things happen. I have a friend of mine that I've consulted with, I've mentored for a while. He got into the business much later on in his life. All right. He got into sales, never did sales, and got into it much later in life. And honestly sucked at it. Just straight up sucked at it. And it was his GM who reached out to me and goes, Jay, can you spend a little time with this guy? And I'm like, dude, he's like in his 60s. Like, what do you think I'm going to teach him, right? Sat down, come to find out that he was a retired angler. By the way, I had to look that up. I didn't know you could actually professionally fish. Like he was a professional fisherman. I was like, that's a thing? You can get paid to do that? And sure enough, yes, he was a paid fisherman. So I was like, once I got him to start talking about that and opening up about that all of a sudden energy, lights, everything. Oh my gosh, it was amazing, right? So now fast forward 4 years, almost 5 years later now, he does fishing talks from the back of his Chevy Silverado. And that's how he's been able to blend this kind of like personal and professional brand. People, he's got tens of thousands of people that have connected with him because of his expertise in fishing. But everybody knows what he does for a living, even though he doesn't talk a whole hell of a lot about it. But his connection is through his personal stakes. So he's found some ways to authentically connect the two. Not a fake it till you make it kind of scenario.
I love that story, Jay, because that's irony wrapped in irony, right? The irony is that all he's doing right now is fishing.
That's it.
It's no different. But what he learned how to do was properly bait the hook and learn, what pound test to use and what rock. Like all you did was unlock his future. Geez, I mean, unbelievable, especially at that stage of the game for him. But that just goes to show you that you're never too late to get started. Everybody 100%. Can have another chance at this, another bite at the apple, if you will. And the point that you made with respect to getting him to tie into something where he had a passion, all of a sudden people become far more attractive when you've got a genuine and authentic passion for something.
Absolutely.
Than if you're just kind of trying to go through the motions or you're forcing your way through it. So
it's a trust factor. It's a trust factor. I mean, I think the intent to building a personal brand is to show people that, hey, you can trust me. I'm a human too. I like Air Jordans, or I like fishing.
That is it, buddy. You nailed it. I mean, trust and confidence are the twin pillars of success in sales and business development, period.
Hey, Sandy, I know we're getting towards the tail end of our conversation today, man, and we covered some seriously cool stuff. This has been a great conversation. Everything from just attracting, recruiting, and hiring to talking about culture, the difference between business development and salespeople, which, by the way, I love that topic. I could probably do a whole nother podcast just on that particular topic because I still think there's a lot of opportunity for salespeople out there in the market to better themselves by honing in their business development talent and efforts. And then just, man, anytime I can jam about personal branding, I'm all in. So this has been a seriously fun conversation. But Sandy, before I let you go, though, for everybody out there that's watching and listening right now who would love to maybe connect with you, find out a little bit more about yourself, or even just follow along with you in your journey, what's the best way to connect with you?
Easiest way is to make sure you get permission from my warden. I'm just finishing up my recent sentence. No, I'm kidding, Jay. Easiest way to get in touch with me, I'm on the major social media platforms, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Clubhouse. Just search Sandy Cerami. It's SandyCerami. I keep it really simple there. You can send me an email at sandy@sandycerami.com, or just visit the website, sandycerami.com. And happy to answer any questions. We don't necessarily run the meter. If somebody has a question or they got, a thought they want to share, we love to connect. And so I'm happy to answer any questions or connect with anybody across the social media platforms.
Thank you, Sandy. Hey, man, this has been so much fun. I really appreciate your time today. This has been an absolute blast. You have yourself an amazing day.
I appreciate it, buddy. Thanks. I'm humbled and I appreciate the time.
Thanks for tuning in to the Strategy with Jason podcast with your host, Jason Harris. Don't want to miss new content? Be sure to check out the full podcast library at strategywithjason.com to stay in the know. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Happy podcasting.